Okay, I think people are still getting in, but I think it's time to start. It's 9:05. So, well, welcome to the workshop of the potential marginal lands as carbon sink in Europe. This, as you know, this is organized in the framework of the project MAIL, which is about identifying marginal lands in Europe and strengthening the contribution potentialities in a carbon sequestration strategy. Well, first of all, I will introduce myself. I will be the moderator of this workshop. My name is Luis Ruiz, or Luis Ángel Ruiz Fernández, if you prefer a little bit longer. And I'm a professor at the Department of Cartographic Engineering and Geodesy in the Polytechnic University of Valencia in Spain. And I'm also a partner of the project. And this workshop is divided in 2 days, as you know. The first day is, well, the main objective is to provide the opportunity for a discussion, a debate about how is the current situation of marginal lands in the European Union, the current policies, regulations, potentials, and applications. And also the contribution of the MAIL project in the developing of tools for identification, mapping, management, and monitoring of marginal lands, particularly incorporating remote sensing and GIS techniques. Well, as you know, the marginal lands nowadays are becoming more relevant from the environmental and socioeconomic point of view. And in order to treat this, we invited some experts in the European Union and international level, from the academy, universities, from the administration and the industry. We will have this morning 10 presentations and a round table that will deal about how is foreseen the future of these marginal lands and the particular exploitation. The second day is focused, or will be focused tomorrow, on the presentation of a massive open online course, a MOOC that has been developed by the partners of the project and will be delivered during the beginning of the next year, 2022. Well, I have to say that they have been registered almost 100 people, and well, during the presentations, there will be, as I say, 15 minutes and plus 5 minutes of discussions. You are open to present some questions or comments. So please raise your hands. You have a little symbol in the menu, and you can raise your hands, and then I will take note and open the microphone for you. And other opportunities to write directly to the chat of the teams, so you can either choose one or the other. Well, I have to say also that this session is recorded, so the whole workshop will be recorded and we'll put it available for people. And also that we will provide a participation or attendance certificate for the people who are during this day or these 2 days until the end of the workshop. So, okay, so, I think this is a brief introduction to the workshop, and the most important is that we start now with the speakers. And well, first, I would like to introduce Professor Petros Patias. That well, he's a professor at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and is the director of the Laboratory of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, and ex-chairman of the School of Urban and Surveying Engineering. So he's a board member of the Department of Urban Planning also, and he was vice rector of the University of Western Macedonia in Greece. So he's the coordinator of the MAIL project, and well, he will present now in the first presentation. He will present the project, the main objectives, and and a little bit of the results. So Petros, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for introducing me. Thank you for organizing this event. I know how difficult it is to organize an event these days, having also 100 participants. Let me see how I can share it from my case. From where can I share it? Okay, here I am. Okay. Now, hopefully you see my screen now.
Yes, we see the screen.
Okay, thank you. So I will briefly go through the mail project and.
Excuse me, Petros.
Yes.
We are seeing the you know, the two slides, the one you're showing and the next one. So maybe you should change.
Yeah, you have to stop to share your screen and try to share it again.
Yes.
Because I think that you choose the incorrect view.
Let me
Right now we are seeing the presenter view.
Again, the same thing, right?
Yes.
No. For some reason, I cannot. Is that okay now?
Yeah, now it's fine. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
So let's go through an overview. As Rui said, this is an MSA RISE project. And the title is Identifying Marginal Lands in Europe and Strengthening Their Contribution Potentialities in CO2 sequestration strategy. This project has a duration of 36 months. It started the 1st of June, January 2019, and ends the end of this year. The total budget is 800,000 euros, and it was quite an ambitious project. Actually, we have all these participants. There's Southern University, who is the coordinator. Then we have Homeotech, who is a company in Greece. The University of Valencia in Spain, who is organizing this workshop. IABG is a big company from Germany. Then we have SRC, which is the Center for Satellite Imagery from Poland. And we have CESE4, which is again a company in Spain. So the objectives of the project is to first to define the parameters that describe the marginal lands, which is actually a novel, let's say, concept. Then we need to select proper base maps to do the marginal land classification. The third objective is to implement data processing workflows to determine the best way to map and monitor marginal lands, to try to quantify the potential CO2 sequestration capacity and sustainable utilization of marginal lands under the prism of land use, land change. Then we need to have alternative proposals of possible vegetation species that might be used in the marginal land exploitation. We need to create the knowledge base and the virtual web classroom for training. And finally, to establish a permanent working team consisting of remote sensing and forestry experts that are focusing in management of marginal lands. So as you see, all these objectives are making a very ambitious project. And these objectives are being implemented in a work plan, which has 6 work packages. One has to do with the dissemination of awareness, and this is part of our dissemination activities. Then we have two management work packages. One has to do with the project management itself, and the other, which is kind of obligatory work packages, it has to do with the ethics requirements. Then we have three work packages. Work package 2, which is about the research. This is the main work package that consists of all the activities that has to do with the research issues. Then we have the technical and financial feasibility study, which is one of our last work packages, and the training of remote sensing and state-of-the-art practices. These are the technical, let's say, work packages. Then we have a work package that has to do with the pilot cases, and this is a way to validate the tools that the previous technical work packages are developing. As you see, that it is a very ambitious project. It has been a very ambitious project, and we have 174 total person months of secondments. That means people are moving around from one place to another in a massive way. Okay. For example, here we have 36 person months going out from our organization. There are 32 man-months coming out from Homeotech, 24 from UPV, 32 from IABG, 21 from Poland, and 29 from Spain again. So there are many people that are visiting, that are seconded to different places. The main idea and the main concept of these RISE projects is that people coming from university and from academia in general are moving to industry, and people coming from industry are moving to academia. And also they're changing countries. So people can be seconded in a different country every time, going to different type of institutions. And on top of that, we had a very difficult 2-year period of COVID, which prevented us of doing this kind of traveling. But finally, we overcome all these kind of barriers, and we finally finishing it, the whole implementation of the project without any delays, and actually without asking for any extension of the time period. So if we go quickly to the work packages, actually the work packages which are of the technical, let's say, concept, we had the work package 2. Work package 2 has 2 tasks that are aiming for preparation. That means we have one task for literature review and another task for the collection of appropriate global and European data sets. So this is the preparation stage. Then the second stage is the development of models for estimation of biomass. So we have 3 tasks here, and the idea here is to validate, to evaluate, and also to make changes of the existing models, to estimate the biomass volume for low productivity mountain and semi-mountain marginal lands, and classification of these marginal lands in terms of capacities. Then the third stage is the development. Okay, here we develop methodologies for the detection, to assessment of their accuracy, and the augmented precision of the detection of marginal lands. So this part is about the development and the evaluation. And then the final part has 2 tasks, which has to do with the development of web page and web tools that has to do with marginal lands management. So we will have the time today and tomorrow to discuss in more detail about these tasks. Then task work package number 3 has to do with the MOOCs, the massive online open courses. So here we have to we prepared already this training package, and we have a workshop organization like this one through the MOOC. Participate in scientific and international events and accompanying software systems. Then we have the work package 4. Work package 4 actually has 4 pilot cases in different parts of Europe, actually from the countries that participants are coming from. So here we validate our tools in 4 different pilot cases, And finally, work package 5 has to do with the monitoring of marginal lands using remote sensing techniques, assessment of their financial, social, and technical aspects, and studying the potentialities of emerging stock exchange markets. And of course, we have some success stories that, summarize all the above. We had not a restriction, but it was kind of suggestion from the European Union that we need to have a kind of a gender balance. And the gender balance that were suggested is that 1/3 of the whole secondees should be female. At least 1/3 should be female. So here we have 37 secondees implementing finally 47 secondments, and 38 of them were girls and 62 were boys. And also, if you see, this is early stage researchers, that means young researchers. 84 of the whole secondees were young researchers, and only 16 were experienced researchers. So we have two goals, and we achieved these two goals, that we put focus and we put emphasis on young and also on women. Our dissemination through the social media and also from our website, we have many hits, as you see, and they are increasing from year to year. We have many followers in Facebook, in Twitter, and in Instagram. We have a dedicated website for that, and we have small videos from all the secondees that has been implemented this project, and they're presenting themselves, and they're presenting the way they are doing their research and where they're being seconded to. So you're welcome to visit our website and check in our social media sector this kind of information. So this is all I wanted to share with you from the start of this workshop, and I'm sure that we'll have the time to go into details in all of this stuff. So thank you a lot, and welcome again to our workshop. Luis?
Thank you, Petros. Thank you for this brief and concise introduction of the project to put us in context. So let's get into the second presenter. That is Mr. Lampros Papalampros. He's a GIS expert and senior officer of Omeotech, which is an environmental management company in Greece. He's a graduate of the Department of Forestry and Natural Environment of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and has a master's degree in photogrammetric production and remote sensing management and GIS. So he's introducing a very hot topic, a very wide topic, very open, which is the concept of marginal lands. So please, Lampros, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Luis. Thank you for this opportunity to describe our outcomes of the project. First of all, I would like to thank everyone first of all, our partners for the level of collaboration, but also all the participants that take place in this workshop. As Professor Patias also said, it was very challenging to implement such a project, especially during COVID pandemic, but here we are to present our final outcomes. Let me share my screen. In this presentation, I will try to describe the general concept of marginal lands and Mail's point of view regarding marginality. The main objective of Mail project is to trigger utilization of marginal lands as carbon sinks by activities related to forestry in the LULUCF sector. So Mail focus on marginal lands that have afforestation and reforestation capacity and no effect in agri-food production sector. It aims to encourage a holistic rethinking of marginal lands in order to optimize their use in the framework of climate change mitigation. But what is a marginal land? From one part, we have the economic definition. Stroers in 2006 defined it as an area where a cost-effective production is not possible under given site conditions, cultivation techniques, agricultural policies, as well as macroeconomic and legal conditions. Galbraith gives a more compact definition back in 1932, like where revenue is just equal to cost of production. From the other part, we have a definition more connected with soil attributes and quality. There, marginality is based on soil suitability and other restrictions that are often adopted by soil scientists and agronomists for the purpose of land use planning. According to Lal in 2005, marginal lands refers to agricultural land of poor quality or susceptible to erosion or other degradation. On this slide, we will see the transition status of marginal lands in terms of productivity. From one side, we have the unproductive lands, while from the other, we have the productive ones. Somewhere between, there are the marginal lands. Through restoration and enhancement, we can go from a lower to an upper state, while through degradation, we have exactly the opposite effect. Similar terms for marginal land also might be unproductive land, waste land, underutilized land, idle land, abandoned land, degraded land, conservation reserve program land, barren land, carbon poor land, fallow land, reclaimed land, contaminated land, etc. From all the above, starting to get more clear that marginality is a relative term. On this slide, we can see some of the factors that define marginality. These are mostly environmental constraints focusing on agricultural revenue, such as poor soil, slope, climate, accessibility, irrigation, or cultivation means. On the other hand, a more modern approach is focusing on different benefits, such as ecosystem services, carbon storage, biodiversity, or recreation. So in this content, marginality is also goal-oriented. This table is a summary of the different variables of marginality found in literature as it was presented by Mr. Abad from CESEFOR and Mrs. Felton from IABG, the authors of Deliverable 2.1. We can see here that most scientists focus on environmental constraints. Most of the time, these are combined with land cover or land use variables. Some basic parameters are taken into account in order to define marginal lands are to avoid conflict with food production, avoid conflict with nature conservation, avoid suburban areas where the land value is high. So we are looking for lands that have carbon capacity potentials, have active contribution in forestry EU policies in order to increase the carbon by afforestation or reforestation projects, and focus on locations where the conflict with agri-food production is minimum. This is our target. Now we will see some examples of land that can be considered as marginal for the scope of MAIL. Such cases are grasslands and partially forested areas, or abandoned agricultural areas that for sure fit in our purposes. Also, as marginal can be considered open mine restoration areas or quarries. In both images, we can see the restoration efforts through afforestation. Here, they are in early stage. Here on the first image, we can see a reforested area of Seixou Forest, Thessaloniki, as a good example of restoration through reforestation. On the right image, in the middle, we can see a forestation pattern around the hill of Philiro. While in the north, we can see the shrubs, the early stage before the enhancement. Just to magnify it a little bit. So a partially forested area that can be considered as marginal after afforestation can be converted into forest. In this content, MAIL project defined marginal land as lands with potential impact to national accounting for carbon stock, excluding agricultural lands and other valuable lands, and lands that is possible to be converted to forest lands, such as grasslands, abandoned croplands, or other lands, according to IPCC guidelines, other lands to forest lands. This figure shows a transition to marginality and the definition of marginal lands as defined by MAIL project. To sum up, marginality is relative, goal-oriented, and is affected by multiple constraints such as environmental, socioeconomic, or cultural, that most of them are dynamic. On this basis, MAIL marginal lands are a subgroup of marginal lands that focus on utilization as carbon sinks by activities related to forestry. Some basic criteria for marginal land detection could be topographic criteria such as latitude, elevation, slope, or aspect, land use, land cover, climatic criteria such as rainfall or minimum and maximum temperature, soil attributes such as moisture regime, soil productivity, soil depth, soil erosion, soil pH, soil pollution. Also, the infrastructures are very interesting regarding accessibility or irrigation, biodiversity and nature protection criteria such as critical habitats for protected species, priority habitats or protected areas, and socioeconomic aspects such as parcel area, distance from a city, break-even price, or yield. For that purpose, an extended review was realized in order to detect and evaluate the available European or global scale datasets that will help to assess land cover and characteristics regarding marginality. The collected datasets were separated in 6 main categories: land cover, terrain, soil geological, climate, ecological environmental, socioeconomic. On this slide, we can see a summary of the available European or global scale datasets that help us to assess marginality characteristics. In the table and the graph, we can see that during the lifetime of MAIL, we collected 36 datasets that are consisting of 200 subsets. Almost 75% of them has to do with soil properties, while land cover, land use datasets, and climate datasets occupy 10% each. The rest have to do with terrain, ecological, environmental, and socioeconomic factors. Here we have to clarify that the participation percentage of each category by no means represents the importance of each dataset in MAIL methodology. As we said before, these criteria work like constraints for MAIL methodology. These constraints were further divided into 2 basic categories in order not only to detect marginal lands, but to classify them in terms of marginality. So we have hard constraints that are binary exclusion factors, for instance, field crops or absolute nature reserved areas, and soft constraints that are factors with variable thresholds, for example, elevation or productivity. But here my presentation is finishing in order not to overlap, as more details about final dataset selection and MAIL classification methodology will be presented later on by Professor Georgiades from Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope somehow to manage to introduce you to the term of marginality.
Thank you, Lampros. Thank you for the presentation and the introduction about the concept of marginal lands, which is not obviously easy to define. Let's see if someone has any comment or question for Mr. Lampros. Okay, no
If you
questions.
have any comment, you can do it in the chat.
Yeah, you can write it in the chat, and then I will compile all the comments. In any case, we'll have the opportunity to discuss at the end of the morning more things related about the definition of the concept of marginal lands also. So if nobody wants to ask a question, I will introduce to the next presenter. Thank you, Lampros, again. I will introduce to Francisco Gallego, which is in substitution of Pablo Sabin. He belongs to the to CESEFOR, which is a foundation and institute for services and promotion of forest industry in Castilla y León, which is a region in Spain. Francisco Gallego is a forest engineer specialized in GIS, and he is currently coordinating some projects that imply the use of artificial intelligence techniques and software development for the development of the afforestation analysis system for agricultural lands, particularly in the region of Castilla y León. So he will introduce about the marginal lands in the European Union and forest regulation and context. So Francisco, please.
Hello, thank you. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Going to share the screen first. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, first thing I would like to excuse Paulo. He would have liked to be here, but he finally couldn't attend the meeting. So it's my turn, and I'm going to try to put the context in the forest regulation at the EU level on marginal lands and restoration. So, well, with I'm going to try to do it in a top-to-bottom approach, from general to more specific policies that affect restoration in marginal lands or restoration in general. So the first thing is the environmental policy in the EU. In this case, you can see the legal basis are based on those articles from the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union. And this policy is based on the principle of precaution, prevention, and rectifying pollution at source, and on the polluter-pays principles. And this policy are developed in the following framework through environment action programs that set out the forthcoming legislative proposals. And in the late 2020, for instance, was presented the last one that is built on the climate objectives of the European Green Deal. It also works through horizontal strategies like the biodiversity strategy for 2030, the forest strategy for 2030 also, and different strategies, or as you can see. Also works on base of international environmental cooperation. The EU is party of numerous conventions and treaties, so the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, Convention of Biological Diversity, and so on, many of them. It also tried to work with public participation, access to environmental information, and the right to justice. And finally, trying to implement these policies through minimum standards for environmental inspections, environmental implementation of review, or a state of the environmental report. This environmental policy covers different topics, but we will focus on the topic of the biodiversity, land use, and forestry, that whose legal basis are those articles. It's important to say that the EU has played an important role in seeking resolutions to biodiversity laws, deforestation, and climate change. And within this topic, we can highlight the following milestones. In 1992, the adoption of the Convention on Biological Diversity. In 2011, the EU committed itself to halting the loss of biodiversity and degradation of ecosystem services. 2015, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, indicating the importance of the protection of biodiversity, and especially in 2019 with the European Green Deal, in which a new biodiversity strategy was established that aims to put Europe's biodiversity on the path of recovery by 2030. This topic has the following objectives and achievements. Through biodiversity action plans in 2006 and 2011, different biodiversity strategies were issued. For conservation of natural habitats, the Habitats Directive was established, that established the European Nature Natura 2000, that comprises these sites of community interest and special protection areas. It also works in the regulation for the prevention and management of invasive alien species. Also regulates the establishment of the access to genetic resources and the exploitation and trade of wild fauna and flora. The EU is part of the CITES Convention that regulates this the international trade of wild fauna and flora. Also related with biodiversity related to animal welfare through the Action Plan on Protection and Welfare of Animals in Marine Biodiversity, also with these biodiversity action plans for natural resources and fisheries. And especially in forests, we have to say that 30% of the surface area of Natura 2000 network are forests, so are under this regulation. And there is also a timber regulation that lays obligation of operators who place timber and timber products in the EU market. And also there is the new EU forest strategy. About the LULUCF sector, there is the regulation for the greenhouse gases emissions that was issued, and this is for the period from 2021 to 2030. We have the financial instruments, mainly life programs, but there are other means like under agriculture and fishery policies, cohesion and structural funds, and so on. And finally, the European Green Deal 2019 that provides an action plan to transfer the EU into a sustainable and competitive economy. And among other actions, it's proposed a new EU biodiversity strategy for 2030. Then, if we focused on forest policies in the EU, some remarks. First, that there is not a common forest policy in the EU, and normally forest products are excluded from existing EU treaties. Only cork and some forest-related fruits are included on those. Also, that the formulation and implementation of forest-relevant policies under the competence of the EU state members, because in this case applies the principle of subsidiarity. That means that the implementation depends on the EU member states, and that the EU doesn't have competencies for legislation in forest policies. And policies ranging from climate to energy or agriculture, where the EU has competencies, affects forest services and goods. As you can see in the graph on the right, there are many different legislations or policies from other sectors that applies or affects the forest-based sector. And as a forest-relevant legislation, we could count on the EU timber regulation, as I said before, the Common Agricultural Policy, and the Habitats Directive. But it's estimated that more than 570 policy documents, including legislation, have direct or indirect effects in the EU forest-based sector. That leads to some concerns about forest policies. And the lack of legal authority or access to EU financial instruments had hindered multi-level forest governance. The EU forest strategy is not relevant at the level of EU member states, so therefore it has had a limited impact on the forest policies at national level. Fragmentation and contradictory policy objectives characterize the EU forest relevant policy. For instance, there are targets that are hard to combine, like the targets for renewable energy. We speak about biomass or conservation targets. And forest-related policies from forestry, rural development, conservation, other sectors are focused primarily on their own policy objectives. So we can draw some conclusions that the EU forest relevant policies lack cohesion or coordination, as more measures remain voluntary and there is not explicit EU competence on forest policy. It is needed a policy integration since more forest-related policy puts for different sectorial priorities. Different socioeconomic interests keeps priority setting uncoordinated at the EU level. But the European Green Deal can bring a change in forest policies as it potentially shifts the focus on how forest resources are considered. Speaking about the European Green Deal, this is a action plan with a package of measures whose objective is to transform the EU into a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy, ensuring non-net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050, economic growth decoupled from resource use, and no person and place left behind. There are a lot of funding for that, as you can see, and it comprises different actions from climate, energy, agriculture, industry, environmental and oceans, transport, finance and regional development, research and innovation. Focusing on environment and oceans, the priorities has been set and are the following: protecting our diversity and ecosystems, reducing air water pollution, moving towards a circular economy, improving waste management, and ensuring the sustainability of blue economy and fishery. As you can see in the graph on the right also, there are many actions that comprises this European Green Deal in this environmental and oceans topic. And one of them is the biodiversity strategy for 2030. That is an ambitious and long-term plan to protect nature and reverse degradation of ecosystem. And linked with that, we have the EU Forest Strategy for 2030. That is one of the flagships initiatives of the European Green Deal and is built on the EU Biodiversity Strategy. In both strategies are included this array and afforestation of biodiversity forests, including the idea of planting 3 billion additional trees by 2030. That has stuff in common with reforestation and marginal lands. Marginal restoration can contribute to these EU initiatives in the following form. It contributes directly to the fulfillment of the European Green Deal through the enhancement of carbon sinks to achieve the climate neutrality by 2050. Contribute also to the EU Biodiversity Strategy and the EU Forest Strategy, specifically to the EU Nature Restoration Plan as increasing the quantity of forests and improving their health and resilience. This is the point 2.4 of this strategy. And in the forest strategy is included a roadmap for planting these at least 3 billion additional trees with the principle of the right tree in the right place. It also contributes to the EU adaptation strategy that will be reinforced through restoration activities as part of nature-based solutions for adaptation, and it will boost the supply of clean, fresh water and reduce risk of flooding. It will also provide benefits such as carbon sequestration. And it is also helpful and contributes to different national, regional climate, energy, biodiversity plans and strategy. But apart from the benefits, the fulfillment of different programs, this marginal land restoration could bring benefits like in the frame of the bioeconomy as a hub of socioeconomic activities. These activities in the reforestation and management of the forest, but also in products like wood, especially for construction, but also for biomass or different. Always following the cascade principle on cascade use of the resources. Non-core products also like mushrooms, nuts, so on. Hunting, social recreation, tourism, so on. But also these marginal lands are situated in rural areas normally that could help to fight against the population that is problem that are suffering in many parts of the Europe, especially in the south, but in general, thanks to the establishment of forest-based industries in the area. Also, the climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation with the adoption of smart climate forestry principles in these restorations, and increase the biodiversity in areas that have a low risk of that. Well, in the MIL project, the MIL project perspective, Lampros has addressed that in the previous presentation. Yes, so yeah, very quickly, as he said, it's a dynamic concept. We found during the task 2.1 30 different definitions for marginal lands. And as Lampros said, also is a goal-oriented definition normally. The MIL project, as he said also, we excluded agricultural lands, protected areas, and we took into account the LULUCF accounting as a sustainable index for deforestation, for these restorations. And this is part of the definition. An example of that, we can say that combining the expertise of the MIL project and our expertise in the region, we have identified sustainable land, suitable lands for reforestation or forestation in Castilla y León, and we did that for to try to quantify in a simple way the potential of CO2 absorption in the region. We did it from an ecological point of view. We didn't take into account a socioeconomic interest criteria, feasibility, or legal constraints. And the result was that in Castilla y León, we have almost 1,800,000 hectares that are suitable for restoration, different types of restoration for sure. That means that is almost 20% of the total area of the region, or almost 40% of the forest area of the region. For this carbon accounting, we use the this methodology of the Ministry of in Spain of the Ministry of Ecological Transition, and we assumed some generalizations, but the results were that we could plant more than 2 billion trees. That means that 77% of the biodiversity strategy target could fit only in Castilla y León. And if you distribute this forestation or this restoration over 10 years, that would mean we had to restore this 179,000 hectares per year. Also, about restoration and best practices, the EU forest strategy stressed the necessity not only of the restoration, but the monitoring of this restoration is not only to plant trees, but also how evolve or how is working that restoration. In this sense, we have also developed a system to assist this decision making in forest management in Castilla y León. The architecture comprises the digitalization of the in situ data collection through automatization of geoprocessing and the use of machine learning algorithms to predict this forestation survival, tree rates of survival. Also, we've seen a new business model in restoration in marginal lands mainly, and this is attracting private investment and also with public-private partnerships. Some companies are funding these restorations in Castilla, but also in Spain, as you see in this news. And then they keep these carbon credits. They sell the carbon credits, but they leave the forest in the place. As an example, we have the Land Life Company, but also Grupo Silvestres and so on. And this is maybe a good direction for the future, and how to address this problem in marginal lands and this restoration. I think this is all for me. So thank you very much. And Luis.
All right, thank you, Francisco, for the very interesting presentation. I don't see any questions, so I remind you that you have the chance for asking questions through the chat or directly raising your hand with the little symbol. Yeah, well, I would like to ask you something. So you presented several European Union regulations that affect the marginal lands, and you mentioned also the opportunities of the Green Deal with the restoration of marginal lands and the use of marginal land for different purposes. But connecting your presentation with the previous one from Lampros about the concept of marginal lands, so do you think that, or do you feel like the overlap of concepts that the marginal land itself has makes it more difficult to make regulations for specifically for marginal lands? I mean, how would you say that this affects to the regulations that affect directly to the marginal lands?
Thanks. For me, the main problem is not the definition of marginal lands, because in the end is we are speaking about suitable lands for restoration, and this is we can work in a global scale, but in the end you have to work in the local scale, and so it's not that problem. The main problem is, as I stated in the presentation, is the homogenization of the regulation in the European level. We don't have this common forest policy, so each state member can have different view of what's marginal land, or what or the instruments for financial also is hindered by this lack of authority. So we don't have really financial instruments now to address that problem, to a restoration like that. Using, in the end, I put this new business model, but is with more maybe, let's say, institutional support, and the lack of this coordination and the authority of the EU competencies. Let's say that difficulties, not only the definition of marginal land, but also the restoration in the end.
Okay, thank you for the clarification and the answer. All right, so we go ahead. If there is no more questions, we go ahead with the schedule. So the next presentation is from Professor Kalatsidas Spyros, which is an associate professor of the Department of Forestry and Management of the Environmental and Natural Resources of the Democritus University of Thrace. He has participated in the Horizon 2020 project, SIMLA, which is a sustainable exploitation of biomass for bioenergy from marginal lands in Europe. So, so based on the outcomes of these projects, he will present an approach to detect the suitable marginal lands for bioenergy crops around Europe. So thank you for coming first, Dr. Spyros, and so please, whenever you want.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like first to express my compliments for the organization of this interesting workshop and my thanks for the invitation to present our approach in detecting suitable marginal lands for bioenergy crops in Europe, the project SIMLA, which was ended in 2018. The partners of the project came from 4 European countries, FNR, BTU and TFEO from Germany, Legambiente from Italy, Democritus University and the Decentralized Administration of Macedonia and Thrace from Greece, and Salix Energy and the Institute of Bioenergy Crops and Sugar Beet from the Ukraine. Therefore, my presentation will be the approach to the use of marginal lands for bioenergy production, the approach of the whole teams, of the whole partners of the project. The question is why to use marginal land for bioenergy production? The answer comes from the needs of the European policies, the European Union policies for renewable energy sources, where biomass is the most important renewable energy source in achieving the targets set by the respective policies. Therefore, we are trying to use any available land to produce biomass for energy purposes, and marginal lands are a good candidate, I would say. However, as already presented, marginal land definition is not a clear issue. Land marginality is not clearly defined, and different notions are used, such as fallow land, abandoned land, degraded land, and other terms presented from Lambros as well, which terms reflect the different views of the researcher and the different management objectives of the land. In our approach in the project SIMLA, we consider the lands with poor site conditions due to low soil fertility and very clear economic inefficiencies with regard to agricultural usability. From this definition, we have excluded sites with potentially high productivity, which were set aside permanently or temporarily, or abandoned due to certain socioeconomic reasons in order to avoid any conflict with the food production of these lands. And we have excluded also the badlands or the lands with naturally extreme low soil fertility, and also the anthropogenic wastelands. In order to quantify land marginality, we have used a system of soil quality rating that was developed in 2008 by Müller et al., which is named as Milkenberg soil quality rating system. It was developed in Germany and was adapted to the needs of the project by our colleagues from BTU, the Brandenburg Technische Universität. And this system uses, as you can see in the right of the slide, 2 sets of indicators. The first set includes 8 basic soil indicators, the basic characteristics of the soil, such as soil texture, soil depth, structure, and so on. The indicators sum up to a score ranging from 0 to 34 points, And the second set of indicators includes soil hazard indicators, which are agents that can diminish the soil quality, and that is contamination, salinization, solidification, acidification, and other agents which take a score ranging from 0.1 up to 3 points. And these two sets of indicators are combined by a product to derive the final soil quality rating ranging from 0 to 100 points. The values of the soil quality rating can be classified into 5 classes, as you can see at the bottom of the graph. The classes have a range of 20 points each one, and they can express the quality of the soil in terms of productivity. In our approach, we used the 2 lowest classes of the soil quality rating as lands indicating marginality. Therefore, we had to calculate these soil quality index values in order to assess, to quantify the marginality of the lands across Europe. The concept, which I will present in this slide, was incorporated in a GIS tool in an algorithm we have developed, starting with the calculation of the soil quality rating. We had to find the values of all soil quality indices, the 8 indices, and also all the hazard indicators. And we have combined these 2 values in order to calculate the SQR index and come to a result which gives us the marginal lands that are available for biomass production across Europe. This marginality of the lands, the available lands, are not necessarily appropriate for biomass production. Therefore, the next step of our algorithm was to exclude from the marginal lands detected by the SQR calculations. We have to remove lands with physical constraints, where the main constraint is topography and especially the slope. Steep slopes cannot be cultivated and produce biomass. And also, we have to include environmental or ecological constraints, where the most constraints come from protected areas, areas belonging to the Natura 2000 network or other types of protected areas. We have excluded areas, applying a spatial filtering to the available lands for biomass production, and the result was lands marginal, which are suitable for cultivation of bioenergy crops. And the last step of the algorithm was to find the characteristics of these lands, the biological and physical characteristics of the lands, and match these characteristics with the ecological demands of the plants that we plan to cultivate in these areas. Therefore, the last stage of our algorithm was a spatial matching, which matched the ecological demands of the plants to the characteristics of the lands where these plants were to be cultivated and produce biomass. The result of the project was one of the results, because the objectives of the project were much broader than producing the maps with the areas of marginal lands in Europe. The result of this GIS tool was a series of maps with marginal lands across Europe and the Ukraine, as you can see in the map here. In order to derive the maps, we used a lot of data sources. I present here some of the most important we have ended up with. The data sources are public sources available to anyone. And as you can see, we have soil database from FAO, European Soil Database from ESDAC, climatic data from World Clean, also climatic classification according to Köppen and Geiger, topographic data from digital elevation models, the network of the protected areas in Europe and other protected areas from the World Database, high nature value farmland, also important to exclude from the marginal lands, and of course the Corinne land cover maps from the Copernicus program. In order to define the cultivated crops, the most important crops for bioenergy production, we have divided Europe in 4 biogeographical zones, as you can see in this map. And finally, the plants that we have considered for biomass production include 3 pines, Aleppo, Calabrian, and black pine, poplar and basket willow, overall 5 tree species, and we have included 3 grass species, miscanthus, giant reed, and switchgrass. Coming up to the results of the algorithm, the GIS software we have developed, here is the map with the SQR values, the calculations of the soil quality rating index across all Europe and also the Ukraine, which was a partner in the project. Here we see only the marginal lands, the 2 lowest categories of the soil quality rating, with the red and the yellow color, the 2 classes, the very poor and the poor soil conditions. And in this map, we see the marginal land which is available for biomass production. That is, from the previous map, we have removed all lands with physical constraints and ecological or environmental constraints. And the last output of the algorithm is a series of maps. Here we can see the different crops, the different plants we have considered for biomass production, and the lands where they are most appropriate to be cultivated. Of course, we can have a different map for each species, and this is only a presentation of all species we have considered in our project. And to give you some numbers, the results, the lands with SQL values below 40 comprise 224 million hectares across Europe and Ukraine, which is the entire marginal land in Europe. From this marginal land, the available for biomass production is only 54 million hectares, which is less than 25. It is 24.1% of the available of the total marginal land in Europe. More information about the results of the project can be found in the website of the project, which is active until now, the Simla EU, as you can see. So I would like to thank you for your attention and your patience.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Spyros, for your presentation of the Simla project. Actually, we have some questions now, and I'm gonna try to collect them. So, Alexander Pristepov, which is an associate professor at University of Copenhagen, that he works on mapping and understanding the drivers of abandoned lands, is posing the following question. So he thank you for your presentation, and he says that according to marginal land definition, probably a large part of Denmark where he works will be considered marginal, but not abandoned. So this is because farmers, they deal with the lands they have, basically. And so as an opposite place, so for example, the best soils that can be abandoned in Ukraine, Baltic states, Russia. So the question is, to which degree do you consider the economic and cultural factors affecting the definition and consideration of marginal lands?
Yes, I have presented only the part of the project that considers land marginality on the basis of this soil quality rating. After the calculation of these results, other project partners have considered different scenarios for the development of plantations in each area. Of course, we had only pilot areas in the participating countries, and I cannot say much about the Baltic countries and Denmark. But we have developed scenarios for the exploitation of biomass for the species that we have considered in our pilot cases, and we have published this in the results of the projects. Of course, we have generalized our outcome, our results, but we cannot be sure for certain areas of Europe. We are quite sure for the results of our pilot cases. And I would like to point out that this Simla project was the first approach to the marginal land concept and their use in biomass production in the frame of the Horizon project. Other projects have followed up, and maybe next presentations could give you more insight in different areas of Europe.
Well, thank you for the answer. And another short question is, so the marginal that is proposed by Vasiliki Lapa, the marginal lands include the abandoned fields of the mountainous areas of the Mediterranean? That's the question.
Abandoned fields?
He asked if the marginal lands will include the abandoned fields in the mountainous areas of the Mediterranean.
Yes, if they are permanently abandoned and they are not used for food production. And of course, if the physical constraints are not exclude these areas. It depends on the topography and the slope. And otherwise, yes, these lands, if they are permanently abandoned and then they cannot be converted to agricultural lands in economic terms, they are included in this approach of marginal lands.
Okay, thank you. And there is another small question, a technical question. It's a curiosity that Michal Krupinski asked about the spatial resolution of the maps that have been created in the framework of the Simla project.
Yes, these are raster maps with a pixel of 500 by 500 meters resolution.
Okay, so thank you. And if there is any other question, you can go ahead and raise your hand. And if not, well, we thank you, Professor Spiros, and thank you for coming here and giving us these insights about the results of project Simla. So our next presenter is Zoe Tolodi. She's at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. She's study agricultural economics, and currently she's doing a master in geoinformation and environmental management. She's one of the secondees of the MAIL project, and she's presenting the potentialities of emerging stock exchange markets for carbon transaction and proposed policies. So, Zoe, please go ahead.
Hello everyone. Do you hear me well?
A little bit low. If you can raise the volume some way.
Now, do you hear me?
I think now it's better.
Okay. Well, share my screen. Okay. Hello.
Okay.
My name is Zoe Tolodi, and the topic of my presentation is about the potentialities of emerging stock exchange markets for carbon transaction and proposed policies. Here you can have a brief overview of the topics that will be discussed. Giving a price on the effects from the use of fossil fuels releasing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere was one of the most important actions of the United Nations Joint Action to tackle the problem of global warming. The national conventions, notably the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, have established the foundations for the principle of recording both greenhouse gas emissions from large industrial installations and many polluting human activities in order to be offset by their absorption from the natural environment processes and mainly from forests. CO2 trading has become a need as a result of US pressure to avoid imposing an environmental pollution tax on major polluters. Consequently, both the CO2 tax and the carbon markets are currently in use around the world to reduce CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gases. Two types of carbon markets exist: compliance or obligatory and volunteer markets. The compliance market is used by companies and governments that by law have to account for their greenhouse gas emissions. It is regulated by mandatory national, regional, or international carbon reduction regimes. Some examples of compliance market are the Clean Development Mechanism, or CDM, and the joint implementation. The CDM allows emission reduction projects in developing countries to earn certified emission reduction credits. It's equivalent to 1 ton of CO2. These certified emission reduction credits can be traded and sold and used by industrialized countries to meet a part of their emission reduction targets under the Kyoto Protocol. Joint implementation works similarly to CDM, with the exception that the host country is not a developing nation. The tradable units from joint implementation projects are called emission reduction units. On the voluntary market, the trade of carbon credits is on voluntary basis. A volunteer carbon market project is similar to CDM project, but it is not regulated by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. There is a variety of different standards that can be applied depending on the project type and size. The project developer can select the most relevant standards, such as the gold standard, verified carbon standard, the Plan Vivo, etc. Carbon offsets refer to absorbance of CO2 that prevent either further emissions of greenhouse gases or sequestrate greenhouse gases in the soil or vegetation. Such projects can be using new technologies, for example, to filter better the emissions of greenhouse gases from big polluters in the atmosphere, or generating power through renewable energy sources, or even protecting forests and planting trees in developing countries. Carbon offsets are produced by projects that carry out on the ground emission reduction activities and are typically measured in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. They can either be traded on the voluntary markets where buyers and sellers trade on their own volition, or as part of compliance market, for example CDM, where government regulations require emitters to either reduce their emissions or purchase offsets. The European Union emissions trading system is a cornerstone of the European Union's policy to combat climate change, and it is a key tool for reducing greenhouse gas emissions cost effectively. It is the world's first major carbon market and remains the biggest one. The European Union emissions trading system operates in all European Union countries, plus Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. It limits emissions from around 10,000 installations in the power sector and manufacturing industry, as well as airlines operating between these countries. And last but not least, it covers around 40% of European Union's greenhouse gas emissions. Here in this graph from International Carbon Action Partnership, you can see the carbon price of the European Union emissions trading system from 2008 to September 2021. The minimum value was in 2013 with €2.68 per carbon dioxide ton. And as you can see, in the last 3 years, the price has increased rapidly. And now the value has reached 64.32 euros per ton. The average price of these years is 14.5 euros per ton. The effort sharing legislation establishes binding annual greenhouse gas emissions targets for member states for the periods 2013 to 2020 and 2021 to 2030. These targets concern emissions from most sectors not included in the European emissions trading system, such as transport, buildings, agriculture, and waste. Under the current regulation, the national targets will collectively deliver a reduction of around 10% in total European Union emissions from the sectors covered by 2020 and of 30% by 2030 compared with 2005 levels. Under the United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change, any process, activity, or mechanism which removes a greenhouse gas from the atmosphere is referred to as a sink. Human activities impact terrestrial sinks through land use change, and forestry activities. Consequently, the exchange of CO2 between the terrestrial biosphere system and the atmosphere is altered. The role of LULUCF activities in the mitigation of climate change has long been recognized. Human activities affect changes in carbon stocks between carbon pools of the terrestrial ecosystem and between the terrestrial ecosystem and the atmosphere. Mitigation can be achieved through activities in the LULUCF sector that increase the removals of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere or decrease emissions by halting the loss of carbon stocks. Carbon accounting collects information relevant for an organization. Either this is a party of a United Nations or a big company or polluter, and it's linked to society in the natural environment in the context of climate. Therefore, climate accounting includes greenhouse gas and carbon accounts, which document the extent of the effects and problems, help to create awareness, and provide reference points for political, economic, and corporate accounts. A variety of parties, stakeholders and authorities must be involved in the design, implementation, and operation of carbon offset projects. Although the parties involved vary from project to project, the following indicate the most common market player categories and types, namely the project owner, the project developer, the project funders, the stakeholders, the third-party auditor, the standard organizations, the brokers or exchanges, the traders, the offset providers, and the final buyer. The offset project development process for projects implemented under volunteer offset standards are divided into two categories, the design stage and the implementation stage. The design stage includes the concept of the project methodology, the project design document, the validation and verification, and the registration. The implementation of the project includes the implementation stage, the monitoring, the verification and the certification process, and the commercialization stage. Sorry. There are some basic criteria that must be followed by all projects in order to be certified. First of all, the project should be additional. Additionality is the most fundamental issue in the carbon offset market. In theory, additionality answers a very simple question, which is if would the emissions reductions have occurred holding all else constant if the activity were not implemented as an offset project? Or more simply, would the project have happened anyway? If the answer to that is yes, the project is not additional. The project should also be real and measurable, which means that projects must use an approved methodology to guarantee that net greenhouse gas emission reductions or have removals occurred and are measurable. Thirdly, it needs to be conservative to ensure that emission reductions are not overestimated. Thus, projects must employ conservative assumptions, values, and methods. Moreover, it has to be permanent. For example, agriculture, forestry, and other land use projects must guarantee that greenhouse gas reductions are not lost due to unforeseen events like fire or diseases. It should also be independently verified. Projects must contract the verification validation body to verify that the project design meets standards criteria and that all greenhouse gas emission reduction or removals are measured in accordance with these standards requirements. Finally, the project has to be uniquely numbered and transparently listed. Projects shall register with a registry operator from a standard in order for each carbon unit to be assigned a unique serial number and listed in the specific standard project database. Furthermore, important safeguards are in place to prevent emissions reductions from being counted twice across different greenhouse gas programs. Summing up, the main project can be added in agriculture, forestry, and other land use projects in the category of afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation, which focuses on increasing carbon sequestration and or reducing greenhouse gas emissions by establishing, increasing, or restoring vegetative cover through the planting, sowing, or human-assisted natural regeneration of woody vegetation. Concerning the future of the volunteer markets, and since this task is just to give the state of the art of carbon markets, we are borrowing the opinion of the experts as it was given in the recent report of Ecosystem Marketplace. The volunteer carbon market describes a remarkable area of innovation in the fight to control global warming pollution, in describing the foundation upon which many promising carbon reducing strategies have been built. And in the current absence of a worldwide regulatory system of carbon reduction, the volunteer carbon market also foreshadows the factors which will drive the next generation of market-based innovation for fighting global warming pollution. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Zoe, for the presentation. Well, I have one question. It's kind of curiosity. I don't know if you will know that, but you mentioned you saw a graph with the carbon stock price rising in the last few years. So is it? I don't know if you know if it is expected that increase even more during the next years, or how is expected that this stabilize somewhat? I don't know if you were taking some information about that.
I really believe it will continue rising because till 2030, I believe so, because with all the European strategies, with the Green Deal and everything, the price of volunteer markets should be increased. But it's also my personal opinion, and also as I have read, I don't remember the paper I have read. You can read also the deliverable that I have sent in 2 days. I hope it will be there. It says that it is going to be higher.
Yeah, in any case, it's in the stock market.
Yeah, some years ago, they weren't very sure, but from 2018 till 2021, there is a very big, a rapid increase. So it's kind of promising, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. Any other question? It seems that there are no questions. So thanks again, Zoe. So we continue with our next presenter, which is Dr. Eftimia Alexopoulou. Eftimia, she's an agricultural engineer, and she did the PhD in cultivation practices of kenaf as a feedstock for bioproducts and bioenergy. She now is a researcher at the Center of Renewable Energy Sources and Saving, and is responsible of the Energy Crops Unit in the Biomass Department of this institute. Well, in addition, she has been scientific coordinator of several projects and related with Marginal Lands and others, and specifically from MAGIC that she's going to present a little bit in deep the MAGIC project. So her presentation is about growing, selecting industrial crops on marginal land, and particularly in the results of MAGIC project. So Eftimia, please.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction to my presentation. First of all, I would like to thank you for the kind invitation to participate. It is a very nice event, and I'm very happy to present MAGIC. I would like to let you know that the next presentation is going to complete the picture on MAGIC, because our work package leader on mapping, Dr. Marie Elbersen, is going to present the results that we have so far. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, if you can enlarge it.
Okay, one moment. Now I suppose it's okay.
No, we are still sitting in the...
Because to me it's full screen.
And not for me. Maybe if you...
Can you try to stop to share your screen and sharing again, but choosing the whole screen, not only one window? Maybe this is the problem.
Anyway,
the whole desktop.
I will try to again, but I'm not sure, because before I had many problems with the connection.
Yeah, if you try to share the whole desktop, sometimes that's the problem.
Now, can you see it or not?
Yes, we see. No, yes, we see your screen.
I cannot see.
What we are seeing is now your Chrome window.
And
Yes.
I cannot see even my presentation now.
Yeah, when you try to share your screen, there are two options. One is screen, another one is window. Probably you have to choose the first one, screen.
I will try again.
Thank you so much.
But now I
Which
cannot
is usually
see
on the
even,
left.
sorry, now I can, sorry, stop presenting and open. And when I try to share, what I have to check to screen the window.
Screen.
It's the desktop and the window.
Yes.
I put the window.
No,
The
desktop.
desktop.
Okay. I don't know if you see it now.
Yes, we do.
Full screen.
No. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. What is my presentation is not going to stay mainly on the lands, but it's going to present mainly the crops that we are growing on the marginal land, because the next presentation, as I told you before, is going to complete the picture on the MAGIC. So what is MAGIC is a project that started almost 4.5 years ago. We are a big consortium of 25 partners. You can see here our website where you can find all the information. And more or less you can see the multi-actor approach of our consortium, that we are a mix of research institutes, universities, SMEs and an industry. So the idea of this project starting to grow industrial crops on marginal land. Why? Because we want to increase the farmers' income and to offer the farmers opportunities to diversify their income. So we group the crops, the industrial crops, in 4 groups. You can see which are these groups. And we are going, and the idea is to work to test them, to grow them on marginal lands according to the GRC report about what marginal land is based on the natural constraints. You can see on the bottom of this slide which were this case, and all the partners had to work on this. As I told you before, the idea is to offer to the farmers opportunity to increase their income, to have access to many different markets, and to grow the land that they are left abandoned. The main product will be bio-based materials, high-value material, but always we try to circular use the whole biomass produced. Keep in mind that in the beginning of the project, we knew that the abandoned area was about 1,350,000 hectares in Europe. I present only one slide for the map, but Berien that will follow, she can say more about this. So in the first 2 years of the project, Wageningen Research Institute did this work, and the estimation was that 29% of the agricultural area in EU 28 could be characterized as marginal, and you can see that in the South Europe was about 34%, and you can see in this table per criteria what is the weight of each criteria to the total marginal area. In the beginning of the project, in the first semester, as a group, we tried to select which are the promising industrial crops to be grown on marginal land. We started from a list of 70 non-industrial crops. We followed multi-criteria analysis, and we selected 20 that you can see in this graph, group it in 3 main groups: the oilseeds, the lignocellulosic, and the carbohydrate ones. So the team for these 20 crops carried out field trials, and the field trials, as you can see later on, they were grouped in 3 main teams. For 10 of them, we developed the value chains for miscanthus, switchgrass, camelina, castor, safflower, willow poplar, industrial hemp, sorghum, and lupinus. In this project, as you saw in the beginning, we are 25 partners. The majority of the partners are the 16 out of 25, they working on the fields. So we split the Europe in 3 zones. You can see in the yellow triangles where the partners are located, and that we are cover most of the climatic areas in Europe. And as I told you before, we have 3 groups of field trials. The first is the trial that started even 20 years ago for the perennial woody species or for perennial grasses. The second group is for the selected crops. We established new field trials, and for each trial it was a specific soil, a specific marginal land. And for each marginal land, we selected specific crops. And in order to test the heavy metals, we decided to do pot trials. So for 15 out of 20 crops, we did pot trials for the heavy metals. Again, this table prepared by Wageningen Research Institute, you can see the location of the trials. So our coverage in MAGIC covered almost the whole Europe. Some photos from the long-term field trials. You can see here the perennial grasses, switchgrass, in 2 photos from switchgrass in the second year and in the year 15. 1 photo from miscanthus where you can see the effect of lack of water to the crop, and giant reed in a sandy area that it was left uncultivated for more than 20 years, and you can see that despite the fact that this area was not used by the farmers in North Greece, giant reed managed to be even 6 meters high. In this slide, you can see camelina trial on a sandy soil in Poland, in the north of Poland, that managed very well and managed to give quite satisfactory yields, take into consideration that the crop was too sandy and dry. If we go through the MAGIC website, and you can see in the bottom of the cover page, you can find 4 tools developed by MAGIC. The first one is the MAGIC maps that are going to present later on. You can click on this and you can find more information. The second is the database on MAGIC crops. Here you can find information for 37 industrial crops. In the third tool, it is a decision support system for the farmers. They can understand, according to the marginality problem that their soil has, which crop can be grown successfully. And the last tool is a tool that just released, is Bio2Match, where we try to match the conversion technologies and the biomass that we can take from each crop that we are growing in MAGIC. A few slides before, I said about the value chains. So for 10 out of 20 crops, we developed selected value chains. You can see for miscanthus, for instance, that we selected pyrolysis in order to have energy, while for castor, for sorghum, we selected anaerobic digester, and the main product was heat and power and biomethane. The report from this analysis of the value chains is available in our website. Some photos of the harvesting trials. All this year, our partner from Italy, CREA, tried to run demo trials, harvesting trials in many sites in Europe. It started with Latvia, and then in 2019 did 2 trials, one in Camelina in Italy, and in Spain, sorry, and 1 trial with castor bean in Romania. This year did 2 additional harvesting trials with castor bean in Greece, 1 in central and 1 in north. In all the case, the soil was marginal, and especially for the last 2 trials, we're trying to develop now some open access articles to present the main problems and what was the yields. In any case, the yields were, as you can see in this graph that we presented castor, the productivity of castor bean in a marginal area in Romania was 2.7 tons per hectare, that was quite satisfactory. In MAGIC, we had to propose an EPA and a focus group for EPAgri. So if you visit EPAgri, you can see that the focus group on industrial crops has a lot of information on industrial crops. You can click the link here. You can see that it was a group of 20 members from scientists, farmers, advisory experts that contribute to make a report on the industrial crops growing on marginal and or contaminated land. And if this can offer some opportunities for the farmers to increase their income and not replace the areas that the main target is to produce food. Apart from the final report that was released in January 2021, there are 5 mini papers, very important ones, that you can get more information. With this, I would like to close my presentation with the homepage of MAGIC. We are going to have next week, actually on 2nd of December, our final workshop in Lisbon. The workshop is going to place a hybrid. By tomorrow, we are going to upload the agenda in MAGIC website. And this event is in collaboration with Be Cool and Bike Project, 2 additional Horizon 2020 project, and there are 2 sessions out of 4 dedicated on the final results of MAGIC that is going to be completed by the end of the year. And thank you for your presentation, and I'm here to answer to any possible questions.
Well, thank you, Eftimia, for your presentation about the MAGIC project. So the MAGIC project is still running, is it still on?
Yes, by the end of December. Actually, it had to finish in June 2021, but due to COVID, that we had to postpone some field and demo trials, we asked for 6-month extension. And now, why I didn't present the yields, because now as a team we tried to analyze all the data that we collected from the fields, and we are going to release them in many articles open access. For instance, we group the partners that they are doing, for instance, miscanthus in all the sites in Europe, and we're going to produce a big open access for miscanthus, another for the annuals. So in May, I expect to have at least 10 articles open access by the end of the year or by January, based on the final results of this project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for also for the information which is on the website. So any questions you may have that is not in the chat now? Yeah, it seems that there is a question from Edita Wozniak. Edita, please. Edita, did you raise your hand in the Teams?
Edita, you have your microphone mute. If you want, you can talk, but you open your microphone.
Okay, now it seems that there is no questions. So anyway, since the next presentation is gonna be with some specific aspect about Magic Project, we can reserve the question for goals for later on. So
just a
let's go
moment,
for.
I would like to apologize that I will not be able to attend the roundtable discussion due to another obligation. Just to apologize. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you for the presentation in any case. So you can unshare your screen now. So we present to the next presenter, that is Dr. Berrien Elbersen. Berrien is a senior researcher at the Wageningen University in the field of bioenergy, land use, and sustainability. So she has been working for many years in a European project in the field of environmental valuation of renewable energy and common agricultural policies, and as well as other drivers of land use changes. So she's a project coordinator also in the field of sustainable biomass used for non-food purposes. So her presentation is an approach to detect suitable marginal lands for industrial crops in Europe. So Berrien, please.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. I will now share my screen. And I will put it in presenters mode. So you see my full screen?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, as Avi Alexopoulou, Dr. Alexopoulou already explained, I'm going to present the part of the identification of the marginal lands in the MAGIC project. Well, I immediately jump into how it was mapped. So as Avi already explained, we built very strongly on the JRC approach to identifying areas of natural constraints. It means that this approach of JRC already indicated which indicators were the limiting factors to identify marginal lands. The focus was, of course, on agricultural lands in this respect. And the guidelines of JRC are only guidelines. Basically, all countries are expected and have already done in many cases to identify their own areas of natural constraints, but it has never been mapped at EU level. So that's what we did in the project. And the mapping was purely based on biophysical limitations. And we identified 18 single factors, and we grouped them in 6 clustered factors, and these were mapped. The 6 clustered factors are related to adverse climate, excessive wetness, low soil fertility, adverse chemical conditions, poor rooting conditions, and adverse terrain conditions. And what we also did was that we worked in an agricultural mask, assuming that the area was agricultural, at least sometime since 1990. So it was a quite broad agricultural mask. And when after mapping, we also made a correction for lands that were improved. So actually they compensated for the marginal limitations. The first one is the adverse climate limitation, and here you see the example of Spain, how it was determined. First, it was determined by the precipitation in relation to the potential evapotranspiration. And then it was determined, so that is basically the dryness. And on the other hand, there is a limitation of a thermal sum, the growing degree days. And you see here a map how it works out in the Spanish situation. Then there was the criterion, or the clustered criterion, of excessive wetness. And that is determined by the number of days at or above field capacity. The limit is set at more than 230 days. Then poor drainage, so certain types of soils that are very poorly drained, or areas which are waterlogged for significant duration of the year. And this results in this limitation map for Europe. Then the next was soil fertility, acidity, alkalinity, and low organic matter level. Actually, this low organic matter level was not in the JRC requirements, but we added it also because we looked at marginality in a broader way than only the JRC constraints. And here you see that these are the areas with a low soil fertility. And what you also see is that you would not expect that here in large parts of Belgium and the southern Netherlands. But you will see later that we have corrected that, because in these areas they really have improved so much their soils that you cannot call them marginal anymore. Yeah, this is the picture for Spain. So you have it more in the Ebro Valley, and here in the western part of that's what Valencia, and more southern western part, eastern part, sorry. And then the adverse chemical conditions, that's related to salinity, acidity, toxicity, and toxicity pollutants. The area where this occurs is limited, but you see it in Hungary, and also again in Spain in the Ebro Valley, also here in Andalusia. Then the poor rooting conditions. This is really the largest clustered class, and it consists of many sub factors. So high organic levels, or texture, heavy clays, abrupt textural differences, impeding soil layers, coarse fragments, surface stones, and surface rocks. And these have all been mapped and clustered into this map that you see at the right. Then the last class is the adverse terrain conditions, which was a steep slope, logically, but also flooding risk was added to that, and that was also not in the JRC areas of natural constraints specifications, and we added it. So then you see here that I explained already that for improvements in the marginal conditions that were related to irrigation. So if you have dryness, then for irrigation you can compensate a lot, and also nutrient gift in areas with high intensive agricultural production. So these areas were also mapped, and there you see that the marginal constraints really do not apply anymore. So we mapped that away. Here you see the final result, and the points here indicated are actually the points where you have the largest occurrence of multiple limitations. Like in Scotland, you have excessive wetness, climate, and limitation in routing all coming together. That's also in Hungary the case: salinity, fertility, excessive wetness, and routing limitations. And in the Ebro Valley, where you have all the limitations coming together. Here you see the final result, and we can conclude that 29% of the agricultural areas in Europe are actually marginal. Well, you do see per environmental zone that this is different factors dominate. Of course, in Alpine you have the domination of climate limitations with routing and terrain conditions. In the Atlantic zone, there's actually a low marginal land share, also in continental. And in the Mediterranean, the limitation is spread all over the different factors, but adverse climate, dryness is of course a problem, adverse routing. And in the north, the largest limitation is adverse climate, of course. Well, and here we see the situation for Spain, and there you see that really 60% of the agricultural land that was agricultural since 1990. 60% of that land is classified as marginal. We also did the evaluation, and here you see, for example, again the Ebro Valley situation. We validated that, in different ways, and in this way, we did it with Google Street View, but we also visited areas, but that's another. I will not explain that; it's too much information. So what you see is that in A, after applying a correction, the area A remains the same with the same limitations, while in area B, we made this correction because it was neutralized by a large-scale center pivot irrigation, and that's also confirmed on the Google Street View picture. And we did evaluations in this way in different points all over Europe. What we also did was that we looked at we classified the industrial crops in MAGIC according to the suitability to different marginal agri-environmental zones. That's how we called the result. And you see here which crops fit to which marginal conditions in every environmental zone in the Mediterranean, Atlantic, and the continental. And based on that, the selection of the management systems in these different zones was made in a MAGIC project. Here you see, and that was also already introduced by Professor Evi Alexopoulou. This is the final MAGIC decision support system that can be accessed through the website, and we're still including the final results in the MAGIC Maps, MAGIC Crops, and MAGIC DSS. But there is already a lot of information in it, and I will just shortly illustrate. Here you see the MAGIC maps that can be visited per. Here we have mapped the marginal zones at the level of LAU. That's an administrative level, and that is similar to municipality level in most countries. And you can click on it, and then it shows per location that you choose the level, the marginal land share. and you can also click on it and see what type of limitations are present in every municipality. Here's an example from a municipality called Narboneta in Spain, and it has a 58% marginal land, and the most important limitation is wetness and rooting. So that can be consulted at a very local level. What we have also done in the DSS is showing what industrial crops can be grown and the marginal land. So statistics can be derived from different areas in all over Europe. Here, for example, you see the marginal land. Spain is really jumping out. France, Italy, of course, in absolute figures, but Spain is really also in relative figures very, very large. Here is the type of industrial crops that are suitable according to the area that is selected. And well, we are, and that is a very valuable comment that was already made. Of course, many marginal lands that we have mapped are used. They are in agricultural use. So what is more interesting to know, of course, additionally, is whether these areas are abandoned. And that aspect has been addressed also in MAGIC. We have developed a methodology to identify abandoned lands using radar information, and that there's a publication now on its way. And we have also developed a likelihood map of the risk for marginal lands to become abandoned, and that information will also be included in the DSS. And in addition to that, we have also made estimates of the yield reduction effects of the marginal conditions for every crop in every location. And that is also going to be maps of that will also be included in the final version of the DSS of MAGIC. So this was my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. Actually, I think I enjoy very much the application you did, the decision support system, because it provides not only maps but also information available about the indicators and about these factors that you presented. We have some questions here I would like to raise. So we have from Michal Krupinski a question that was actually from Edita. Did you analysis the environmental impact of such biofuels plantations in one of the projects be first? The results indicated that such plantations had very negative environmental consequences. So I think this is a little bit focused in some aspect that you mentioned. So the appropriateness of the land for different crops in marginal lands. But if we go all the way around, so do you manage to get information about how these crops may affect to the environmental issues of the marginal lands themselves?
Yes, there was a work package looking at the environmental impacts of different biomass delivery chains, and we also mapped other characteristics to the marginal land, like what was also done in Simla, so the high nature value farmland areas, And we also mapped the risk for soil erosion. So I completely agree that all these aspects need to be taken into account more at a local landscape level to determine the real impacts. And that aspect is really the most challenging. And what we have done so far in MAGIC is assessing impacts at a higher level. So we did address also biodiversity impacts, but not in a specific location. And that is really the next step, I think. And we will probably also discuss this in the round table, where eventually what you can do in a sustainable way in every location will need to be determined at the local level.
May I add something on this?
Please.
First of all, in MAGIC, we are not working on biofuels. The main idea is to grow industrial crops for high added value products, and it's not key priority the biofuels. And keep in mind another issue. RED 2 is speaking about growing oilseeds or non-food crop for biofuels in marginal, abandoned or degraded land, or in rotation in case that they can increase the productivity of the marginal area. So the issue is very complicated, and we have to take into consideration all the elements. It's not so simply to answer, but keep in mind that RED 2 and the gap and 50 for 55, all together, if we put all together, it's not easy to answer immediately.
No.
But for MAGIC, keep in mind that we didn't include biofuels. There is another project, the bike project, where we working on low ILUC lands, and oilseeds is one of our case studies.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in adding to that, basically the thing is in marginal land that ILUC, in my opinion, is not the biggest issue, because you already have a low yield. So the ILUC effect, even if you grow food crops on it, is basically limited. So what I think that policy should do is that you choose for the most sustainable land use, providing the highest ecosystem services. And these services should be related to carbon capture and biodiversity conservation, or restoration preferably. And I think that is where we need to focus on. What is the best farming system or forest system to do that has the largest delivery of ecosystem services?
Yeah, thank you. There is another question from Juan Pedro Carbonell. Could you inform us if you have applied any kind of constraint or limitation with respect to urban areas, or are the results only applicable to agricultural areas?
Yes.
I think that's yeah. I think this is related to the in the framework of MAIL of our projects. We have some results also from marginal lands, and about the area covered by marginal lands, and so in particular in Spain and Greece, and they were very high values of marginal lands, but not as high as the ones that you show. So one reason may be because of the consideration or not of urban areas or suburban areas, but also about the thresholds that we use in order to consider all these factors. So the difference of thresholds they may affect to the consideration or not of marginal land. So well, probably you can have some comments about that.
Well, the starting point of Magic was always to limit our mapping to agricultural land. So we masked out all urban areas and forest areas beforehand. The only thing is that it's not easy to find the right mask. So we said that because it should also include areas that are already abandoned from agriculture. So what we did was that we took 4 layers of Korean land cover, 1990 to 2012, and we said in our mask we have all areas that were in an agricultural class, land cover class, in one of these 4 Korean layers. So not necessarily it's agricultural land now, but it was at least once since 1990.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so another last question is from Alexander Prichepov, sorry. Thank you. If such map of abandonment with Sentinel-1 is for entire Europe, that's his question.
Yeah, well, that would be ideal, wouldn't it? But yeah, we are developing an approach using radar data, radar and coherence indicators, and that is working pretty well in 2 Spanish regions. So we managed to identify abandonment in cropland, in former cropland or cropland well, and now but for applying the methodology to the whole of Europe, we still have to do more, and we plan to do that work also in collaboration with the European Environment Agency, because we're part of the topic center there, and they're very much interested in identifying abandoned lands more and more, also because DG Agri is asking for it. So, and the good thing about radar is that it is it's easier to use, and you don't need to correct for cloud cover and all that. So that has many advantages. And in our approach, we can really detect presence or absence of management, and that is what you really want to detect, and not only the development of the vegetation. But no, it's not yet available for the whole of Europe, unfortunately. What we did do was likelihood mapping, bringing several factors together that are influencing land abandonment and that increase the chance of land being abandoned. That is a layer that we are also including mapping on our marginal land and will be included in the DSS.
Very interesting, the application of radar on the detection of abandonment. One last thing from Alexander. He's welcoming us to join the Global Land Program's Agricultural Land Abandonment Working Group. And he just left a link in the chat, so if anybody wants to go. Well, thank you. We will have later on more opportunities to discuss about this in the roundtable.